My toxic boss humiliated me until I quit. But 3 months later, I came back as her boss, 2 levels above her. And by the end of the week, I got her fired.
My name is Marcus Keller. And if you told me a year ago that I'd end up in the center of a full-blown corporate showdown, I would have laughed in your face. I was just another guy. Husband, son, middle manager, doing his best to stay afloat. But life has this funny way of setting you up for stories you never thought you'd be part of. So here's how it started. Last year, my wife and I both got laid off in the same month. Same damn month. She was in product development at a startup that imploded overnight. I was working at a mid-sized logistics tech firm that had just gotten acquired and gutted. One cold email later, I was out the door with a 2-week severance and a box full of sticky notes and dreams. The world didn't slow down for us. Rent was due, car insurance kept coming, and we had my mother's hospital bills piling up after she took a bad fall down our porch steps. We were broke. Not metaphorically, literally. There were nights we'd split a grilled cheese and pretend we weren't hungry. Nights where I'd sit on the edge of our bed staring at my inbox, refreshing it like I was waiting for salvation. I was applying to anything that had a salary and benefits. Hell, even a decent dental plan sounded like winning the lottery. So when I got an offer, finally, after months of rejections, ghostings, and awkward interviews where 20-somethings asked me if I still like to learn, I said yes without blinking. It wasn't ideal. The title was a step down from my previous role. The pay was okay, not great, but the hiring manager, Greg Harmon, seemed decent. The veteran guy knew his stuff, and more importantly, he respected people's time. And the team? They seemed friendly, like people you'd want to have lunch with. Not perfect, but after the hell we'd been through, it felt like a lifeline. Turns out, Greg was also drowning in work. 2 weeks in, he told me he was stretched thin and asked if I could start reporting to another manager in the org, a woman named Jenna Caraway. You'll technically be my direct, but Jenna will be your day-to-day. I didn't ask too many questions. I was just grateful to be earning again. But let me tell you something about Jenna. If you took all the worst qualities of a toxic boss, micromanaging, narcissism, passive-aggressive slights, and turned them into a single human being with a shiny LinkedIn profile and a yoga habit, you'd have Jenna. She didn't just manage, she dominated. She wasn't my boss, she was my warden. Day 1 under her, she asked me to skip lunch because we really need to power through today. Day 2, she moved a vacation day I had requested for my wedding anniversary because QBR prep comes first. And day 3, she called me on a Sunday night at 11:07 p.m. just to clarify a color choice on a slide deck. But it wasn't just the work stuff. No, Jenna got personal. She made comments about my appearance. "You're a bit stocky for someone in tech," she once said, laughing. "You lift? Or is that just genetics?" Another time, after a lunch meeting, she looked at me and said, "You don't really look like someone who eats salad." Always with that damn smirk. I tried to brush it off at first. I tried to stay professional. I needed the job. We needed the money. But every day under Jenna chipped away at me. She'd second-guess every decision, redo my slides, nitpick my calendar invites, and make offhand comments like, maybe this role's just a bit above your level. I pushed back once, told her, politely but firmly, to stop talking about my body. That just made it worse. She upped the pressure, berated me on calls, interrupted me constantly in meetings, and when I dared to defend myself, she'd shoot off emails to Greg suggesting I needed coaching. I held on for months. It was crushing. I'd come home most nights and just sit in the driveway, not wanting to go inside and show my wife what I'd become. Defeated, hollowed out, robotic. Until one Friday afternoon. That day, Jenna lost it over a meeting I scheduled. Apparently I hadn't included someone from her team. I didn't even know the person existed. She tore into me, yelling in the middle of an open office floor when I was already trying to keep it together.
What she didn't know was that I was dealing with a family emergency. My wife had lost her cousin the night before in a car crash, and I was still trying to figure out if we could fly out for the funeral. I snapped. Full on snapped. I walked straight to Greg's office, shut the door, and laid everything out. 3 pages worth of notes. Every slight, every late call, every time she crossed the line. Greg looked relieved, almost. He said, "You're not the first. Honestly, half her team already left." He offered to move me to another team under his direct supervision. I nearly cried. It felt like someone had thrown me a life vest. For a minute, I thought the storm had passed. But no, Jenna wasn't done. Even from afar, she kept trying to pull strings. She'd CC me on emails I didn't need to be on, reminding me of protocols. She'd call me out on Slack in group channels for things that weren't even my responsibility. And one day, God, I'll never forget it, she showed up at my desk, stood there in front of my new team and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Still pretending you're qualified, huh, Marcus?" Greg heard her. That was the moment he finally snapped back. He told her to leave, told her she was out of line, but she didn't stop. The whisper campaign kept going. I was 2 months into the new team and already breaking again. So I quit.
I printed out my resignation letter. I stapled the list of her most disgusting comments to it, and I CC'd everyone. No shame. I told the truth, out loud. The next 3 months were hell. My wife found a job at a health nonprofit, but it barely paid enough. I was still scraping together freelance contracts and applying to roles like it was a second full-time job, sometimes over 20 apps a day. We were behind on bills. Grocery runs got tighter and tighter. I started measuring peanut butter by spoonfuls. And then, like fate was giving me a nudge, I saw a post on LinkedIn. Thomas Grant, an exec I used to work with and respect the hell out of, was joining my old company, Jenna's company. I sent him a quick congrats and offered to share any insights he might need about the org. We jumped on a quick call. I gave him the lay of the land, told him where the company was strong and where it needed work. We reminisced a bit. And then came the shocker. "Marcus," he said, "I've got a spot for you, Chief of Staff. Interested?" I didn't even blink. I just said, "Yes," no hesitation. Thomas wasn't just some old contact. I'd worked under him for 5 years back when we were both grinding it out at Archer Dynamics, one of the most cutthroat logistics tech competitors in the industry. He knew what I brought to the table. I was a director there, managing strategy and operations. I'd pulled off turnarounds, restructured departments, and closed deals with government agencies. I was no rookie. Thomas didn't need a resume. He already knew what I was capable of. So when he said Chief of Staff, he meant business. And suddenly, I was heading back into the very company I left, only this time I wasn't crawling in, I was being airlifted in, 2 levels higher. I didn't tell anyone, of course, not yet, especially not Jenna. Then came the first all-hands meeting under Thomas's leadership, a classic company-wide event in the giant conference room full of VPs, directors, senior managers, and all the middle layers. The executive team lined up at the front, Thomas center stage, delivering his welcome speech like a boss. I stood off to the side with the other new leadership hires. And then, in the middle of his remarks, Thomas casually drops it. "We're also thrilled to bring in some trusted talent to help us move faster and smarter. Marcus Keller will be joining as my Chief of Staff starting this week." Boom! You could feel the oxygen shift in the room. Heads turned. And there it was, the look on Jenna's face. She was seated 3 rows from the front, pen frozen midair, jaw clenched like she'd just bitten into a lemon rind. That expression alone could have paid for my therapy. It was like watching karma slap someone in 4K. I didn't look at her, didn't give her a nod or a smirk, just kept my gaze forward, calm, collected, as if she were just another face in the crowd. But I knew she felt the ground shifting beneath her. And she didn't waste time showing her true colors. Not 48 hours later, Thomas forwarded me an email Jenna had sent him. And let me tell you, it wasn't subtle. The subject line read, "Concern about Marcus Keller." Her message was a masterpiece in corporate backstabbing. She painted me as some rogue, a disruptive, emotional employee who had tried to manipulate leadership, caused chaos, and ultimately quit in a fit of immaturity. She called me unqualified, said I'd never proven myself in the company, and that she suspected I had lied to get ahead. She even included a line suggesting I might have used external pressure or personal relationships to secure my new role. She didn't even try to fake professionalism. It was raw, venomous, and desperate. Thomas's email to me was one line. Any context on this? I sat at my new desk, in my new office, on the same floor as the executive team, staring at her words, and I smiled. I called Thomas immediately. We talked for an hour. I told him everything. I laid it all bare. The late-night calls, the canceled PTO, the body-shaming comments, the mental toll. I told him about the confrontation, the list I stapled to my resignation letter, how Greg had been sympathetic but powerless to stop her. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her she was toxic, and that her behavior wasn't just a me problem, it was systemic. But the part that sealed it, I told him to talk to Greg, because Greg would confirm everything. Later that same afternoon, Thomas did just that. He called Greg. Greg didn't hold back. He confirmed that Jenna had lost both halves of her team in under a year. Everyone who'd reported to her either quit, transferred, or filed HR complaints. Greg even told him that HR had a file on her thicker than a Manhattan phone book. And it didn't stop there.
After word spread that I was back and working directly with Thomas, a few of Jenna's most recent ex-employees reached out. They sent me emails, proof of her bullying, the belittling comments, the manipulation. One guy forwarded an email she'd sent after he took a sick day, accusing him of faking it for a long weekend. Another woman shared screenshots of Slack messages where Jenna joked about her accent and told her she needed to be less shy and more American. These weren't just bad management moments. These were lawsuit-level offenses. So, I compiled it all. I sent Thomas a clean chronological summary. Attached are the documents, the emails, the resignation letter I'd left behind, and even a scanned copy of that infamous stapled list, still saved on the desktop of my old laptop, which IT had reissued to me when I returned. 3 days later, Jenna was called into a meeting with HR and Thomas. 2 hours after that, her name was removed from the company directory. And by Friday, Jenna Caraway was gone. Just like that. No goodbye email, no farewell donuts in the break room, just a silent exit. And you know what? It wasn't about revenge. Okay, maybe a little bit. But mostly it was about justice. About knowing I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't imagined the gaslighting, the manipulation, the public humiliation. That someone saw it, believed it, and acted on it. I went home that night, opened a bottle of red with my wife, and we sat on the porch, listening to the crickets and the late summer wind. She looked at me and said, "Marcus, you didn't just win, you healed." And yeah, I did. But the story wasn't just about me. It was about every person Jenna hurt, every colleague who sat in silence, wondering if they were overreacting, every Friday evening spent in anxious tears, every quiet resignation because no one listened. Well, someone listened, and someone acted. And sometimes, in this crazy American corporate maze, the good guys do get the last word. Absolutely. Here's the third 1,000-word segment of Marcus Keller's revenge story, picking up right where we left off, with the same tone and narrative continuity. The Monday after Jenna was fired, the office felt different. Not just for me, but for everyone. People walked with a little more ease. The silence that used to hang over her wing of the floor, tense, heavy, like waiting for thunder, was replaced by casual chatter. I passed a few folks I barely knew who gave me quiet nods of acknowledgement. One guy, a junior analyst named Raj, stopped me by the coffee machine and just said, "Thank you." That's it. No explanation needed. Word spreads fast in corporate America, especially when someone like Jenna exits without a trace. No farewell party, no auto reply, just gone. And everyone knew why. They may not have known all the details, but they knew something finally happened. But my goal wasn't to bask in the aftermath. I had a job to do. Thomas didn't bring me in for payback. He brought me in to fix what had been broken for years. This company was bleeding talent, slow to adapt, and paralyzed by egos. Jenna was just one infected node in a much larger system, and I was ready to clean the house, not with pitchforks and fire, but with structure, empathy, and accountability. The next few weeks were a blur. Meetings with department heads, deep dives into the org chart, long chats with HR about culture, performance reviews, and retention. I set up skip-level meetings, town halls, and anonymous feedback surveys. I gave people space to talk, really talk, for the first time in years. And I made one rule clear. No more fear. You had something to say? Say it. Respectfully, constructively, but say it. I wasn't going to let another toxic leader create a culture where people walked on eggshells just to survive. This wasn't a boot camp. This was work. It should be hard, but not inhumane. One afternoon, while going through old employee exit surveys, I came across a name I recognized. Lena Morris. She'd been Jenna's right hand before I arrived the first time. She left abruptly 6 months before I resigned. No warning, no goodbye, just vanished. Her exit survey? Empty. Not a single word. I reached out. Found her on LinkedIn, sent her a message. Hey Lena, it's Marcus Keller. I recently returned to the company in a new role. I'm working to improve the culture and would really appreciate your insights if you're open. She replied in 10 minutes.
We met for coffee the next day. Lena had stories. So many stories. She'd stayed silent back then because she was fresh out of grad school, afraid to ruin her reputation, convinced no one would believe her over someone as respected as Jenna. But the trauma stuck. Sleepless nights, self-doubt, therapy. She told me Jenna used to call her soft, made fun of her stutter during a meeting, and once threatened to write her up for being emotionally unstable after she cried at her desk following a death in the family. My stomach turned. I didn't know how to fight it, Lena said, so I ran. I looked her in the eyes and told her, you didn't run. You survived. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just here to fix operations or metrics. I was here to rebuild trust. That month, I proposed a new initiative to Thomas, the Cultural Integrity Program, a no-nonsense, executive-backed process that empowered employees to flag toxic behavior, not through vague HR black holes, but through a cross-functional team with teeth, anonymous channels, guaranteed follow-ups, zero tolerance for retaliation. A culture score would become part of every manager's quarterly review. Thomas signed off immediately. And you know what happened? People responded. Leaders who had grown comfortable with fear started listening. Teams that had been buried in silos started collaborating. Attrition slowed. Performance improved. We started winning again, not just on paper, but in the hallways, in the smiles, in the laughter that slowly returned to the break rooms. Meanwhile, Jenna? Well, the industry isn't that big. Word travels. She landed at a boutique consultancy in Chicago. Last I heard, she lasted 4 weeks. Someone on her new team had been at our company 2 years ago, connected the dots, brought receipts. She was shown the door again. And I didn't gloat. I didn't post any vague tweets or smug LinkedIn updates. I just kept building. Because that's the thing about true revenge. It's not about crushing your enemies. It's about outlasting them. It's about standing tall in the space they tried to shrink you into. It's about showing up again and again with integrity, even when they tried to break you. Some days I still think about those first weeks under her, about the panic attacks, the stomach knots, the long walks around the block just to keep from quitting. But then I remember who I've become since then. Not just a chief of staff, not just a guy who survived a toxic manager, but a leader who listened, who acted, who stood up when it counted. And that, more than anything, is the legacy I want to leave behind. Not just that Jenna got what was coming, but that everyone else got what they deserved. A workplace that respected them, that protected them, that believed them. Because in the end, that's the kind of revenge that lasts. 6 months after Jenna's departure, the company felt like an entirely different place.
Our quarterly metrics were the strongest they'd been in 4 years, but more importantly, the pulse surveys, the anonymous ones HR ran, showed an 83% increase in employee morale. People were staying longer, speaking up more, and collaborating across teams without fear of getting chewed out or steamrolled by some ladder climber with a fragile ego. I was proud of the numbers, sure, but it was the little things that stuck with me. It was watching the intern team present in front of executives without stammering or looking for the exit. It was overhearing someone in the lunchroom say, "Man, I actually like coming into the office now." It was the handwritten thank you note I found on my desk from Raj, the analyst who once thanked me by the coffee machine. Turns out he'd almost quit before I returned. Your story gave me the nerve to stay, and your leadership gave me hope that not all companies are broken. That one I kept. Not in a drawer, on the wall, framed, because it reminded me why I came back, why I fought. Now, people sometimes ask me, mostly in one-on-ones or mentoring sessions, if I feel bad about how things ended for Jenna, if I regret being so loud about it, if I ever wonder what might have happened if I just kept my head down and toughed it out. And every time, I give the same answer. No, not for 1 second. Because silence is what lets it go on so long. Silence is what lets her drive people out, break spirits, destroy confidence. Silence was the weapon she used. And the day I stopped being silent, everything changed. Not just for me, for dozens of others, maybe even hundreds. And let me be crystal clear. This isn't about canceling someone. This isn't some internet witch hunter corporate takedown fantasy. This is about accountability, about putting up boundaries and demanding dignity in places where people are expected to just suck it up and cash their check. I didn't come back to settle the score. I came back to protect the next Marcus, the next Lena, the next Raj.
I came back because I knew how it felt to wake up and dread your job. Not because of the work, but because of who you had to survive to do it. Thomas once said something to me, maybe 2 months into my return. We just wrapped up a team summit in Denver, where I'd facilitated a session on psychological safety and leadership humility. Everyone stayed late to talk, even the VPs. People were energized, engaged. Thomas and I sat at the bar afterward, nursing a couple of scotches. He looked at me and said, "You know, I didn't bring you back just because I trust you. I brought you back because I needed someone who remembered what it was like to be low. Most execs forget. You didn't." That stuck with me. Because it's true. I hadn't forgotten. I remembered how I'd once felt invisible, disposable. I remember staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., rehearsing how I'd ask for a sick day without sounding weak. I remembered hiding in a stairwell to cry after Jenna humiliated me in front of a client. I remembered it all. And that's what made me the leader I became. A few weeks later, we launched a mentorship program for junior staff, pairing them with people across departments, not just for career advice, but for real talk, navigating office dynamics, mental health, boundaries, emotional resilience. We called it Bridge. The logo was a simple arch over water, a crossing. Because that's what I'd been given, a bridge when I thought I'd drown. One afternoon, I got an invite request on LinkedIn. The name caught my eye. It was from Greg. Yeah, that Greg, my original manager, the one who'd tried to help even though his hands were tied. He'd left the company not long after me, moved to Austin to work for a nonprofit logistics outfit. We hadn't spoken since I returned. His message said, "Marcus, I just wanted to say, well done. I've been hearing about everything you've built since you came back. You made the place better. You did what I couldn't. Proud to have worked with you." That one made me choke up because I remembered how hard Greg had tried, how guilty he felt when he couldn't protect me from Jenna. He wanted to do the right thing, but the system failed him too.
And that's something a lot of people miss. These stories aren't always black and white. Not everyone who stayed silent was a villain. Some just didn't have the power to change things. But someone has to start. Someone has to say, enough. And in my case, I guess that someone was me. Fast forward to today, almost a full year since I walked back through those glass doors and into a different kind of storm. My wife and I, we're thriving. We paid off the hospital bills. Finally took that trip to Big Sur we'd been putting off for years. I got promoted again, VP of Strategy and Culture. But the title, honestly, that doesn't mean much compared to the impact. What matters more is that I've mentored over 40 people this year alone. Lena now works on my team as a senior operations analyst. That our company is being used as a case study for healthy workplace transformation in a graduate course at Stanford. And that every single person who was once hurt by Jenna knows they were never the problem. That's the real win. Not the firing, not the promotion, not the applause, but the healing. Because revenge might feel good at the moment, but restoration, that lasts. And if my story helps one person, stand up, speak up, or walk away from toxicity with their head held high, then every sleepless night, every sandwich dinner, every breakdown in the parking lot, it was worth it. Because I didn't just survive Jenna. I outgrew her. And in doing so, I showed others they could too.
If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching.